Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a very busy Charles Coulombe.
Very busy.
Yeah, you've been
very busy.
You've been all over the place recently, Charles, haven't you?
Well, it depends. I mean, last weekend I flew to Istanbul and then flew to Boston. And then from Boston, was driven inland to New Hampshire and did the St. Benedict Center Conference. 2 talks. The conference was on the marks of the church, one Holy Catholic and Apostolic. I spoke on the Apostolic Succession, and the other topic was how the sanctity of the papacy, the holiness of the papacy, is not affected by evil popes, which apparently, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, is an important topic these days.
It was funny the way whoever decided the title of the article, it was eyebrow raising. Is the papacy really holy? As if it seemed like as if you're questioning the office.
Well, it was, and I did, and I answered, and I said, yes, it is. So there.
No, but it seemed like it was going the other way.
Well, it did, but you're right. I did set them up for a fall.
That's clickbait, Charles.
I know.
I thought you had standards. I thought you had journalistic integrity.
What? Why should I stand alone from everyone else? Journalistic integrity. Let me tell you something. Journalistic integrity. Golly. You know, did you ever read the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears?
Yeah.
Do you think it happened exactly the way it says in the story?
Well, it's...
Yeah. Okay. Let's see your journalistic integrity now, smart guy.
Oh, that's fiction. You're talking about reality.
Oh, there's a difference. Let me tell you something, young man. We all have a saying in my family. Reality is just a crutch for those who can't handle fantasy. Yeah. You heard it here first.
I think you're in the wrong business, buddy.
Oh, yeah, you think so? Obviously, you've never met my colleagues of all descriptions and all stripes.
That's true.
See? Gotcha there. Anyway, but I did come back, and I came back. Well, first I had to go to the airport, and my friend Jake Sullivan very kindly took me back on a wonderful path. First to Still River, where I saw various people, Brother Leonard Mary's grave, and then to Sudbury, Mass, for a few cool-woos at the fabulous, and I do say fabulous, Wayside Inn, made immortal by Longfellow in his book, Tales of a Wayside Inn. And the opening, as ancient as this hostelry as any in the land may be, built in the old colonial day when men lived in a grander way. Love the Wayside Inn, one of my favorite places since my childhood. But from there, we went on to Concord, New Hampshire. Not New Hampshire, Concord, Massachusetts, where the first shot of the Revolution was fired, where the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard round the world. We didn't go to Concord Bridge. Instead, we went to the fabulous Colonial Inn, operating since 1716 in Concord, and had oysters on the half shell. I had Yankee pot roast and followed it up with Indian pudding. Oh, gosh. Oh, and did I mention it was autumn? And of course, driving through New England in autumn is an hallucinogenic experience. Absolutely marvelous. But from there, we had to go to the fabulous airport, and we went via Salem. But it's October in Salem. Haunted happenings. The old town was gearing up, and we stopped briefly by the world-famous wicker shop, Crowhaven, founded by Laurie Cabot, the official witch of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And no, for those of you who are great believers in my supposed occultism or Satanism, I didn't make any purchases, nor did I get or give any readings. But it was amusing to watch the atmosphere of the place. We stayed there about 2 seconds. The place was crammed. So we filed through and went to the fabulous Hawthorne Hotel for a quick nightcap. And then on to the airport, where I got on a flight bound for, once more, as I had coming back there, Istanbul. Istanbul is Constantinople now. It's Istanbul, not Constantinople. Why did Constantinople get the works? Nobody's business but the Turks. Anyway, there I was for an hour and a half as opposed to the 4 hours on the way out, and then flew back to Vienna. And now I am happily ensconced once more in the heart of the empire. But I'm going to another capital of this great transnational, multinational empire. The day after tomorrow, Friday, I am headed for Zagreb in the Kingdom of Croatia. There, on Monday, 3 things will I help celebrate. 1, it is the feast day of Blessed Karl of Austria, last reigning emperor of Austria-Hungary, and father of the Archduke Otto, grandfather of the Archduke Karl, great-grandfather of the Archduke Ferdinand. It is his feast day. He's a blessed. So they'll be celebrating it right in Zagreb, and I recommend everyone do the same wherever you are. He's a tremendous patron, a decent, wonderful man living in a world gone cray-cray. But that's one of the 2 things we'll be celebrating. It's also the anniversary of Croatia becoming an equal partner with Austria and Hungary in the monarchy, and the end of World War I. So we shall be honoring both Blessed Emperor Karl. We'll be honoring Croatia and its short-lived place in the scheme of things in the empire, and also the dead on both sides of the Great War, who made the ultimate sacrifice for freedom. What we have now, I guess. Freedom. Yeah, sure. You bet. Whatever it is.
Why do you have such a problem with freedom?
I don't. I don't have a problem with the tooth fairy either.
Sad.
What, did I have a problem with the tooth fairy? Listen, she gave me a quarter a tooth when I was little. Yeah. I bet you got a lousy dime or a nickel or something. I got a quarter. Anyway, moving along. So I'll be in Zagreb. The following week, I'm going to Salzburg, the following weekend. The hills are alive and they're out to get you. Anyway, yes, Salzburg is where the von Trapps lived. And if you're an American, I've done this, so I'm not going to do it again, but you could take the Sound of Music tour. And there you'll find out something that I knew when I saw the movie in the theaters, long about the time they were getting rid of silver. And that was that the von Trapps in the movie escaped over the mountains. The problem with that is that it meant they were escaping into Germany, which I pointed out to my father at the time. And he said, that's right, son, they're going to hide out in Wilhelmshaven. Know to look for them there. Wilhelmshaven being where the captain was supposed to report for duty. So the idea being that they would escape into Germany, hide out precisely where he was supposed to be, so they wouldn't look for him. Anyway, how do you handle a problem like Maria? Speaking of which, I think that the girls of the secretarial pool have gone a little cray-cray.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, I'm just saying that they serenaded me, before the pre-show when they're getting the cameras and all that ready. The feed down into the secretarial pool, they gave me their rendition of various songs from Sound of Music. And given the early 60s clothes to make them wear, it made me feel like I was back in my childhood. It was amazing.
That I make them wear?
Well, it's a condition of their employment, and I presume that you're the one who sets those conditions.
It's like, we encourage, right? It's
do encourage.
Yeah, we reward people who do that. And so why not do it?
Let me tell you something. I don't think I have ever seen bouffants with those stupid little bows in them since I was in first grade. I don't think until you started, shall we say, offering sartorial guidance to the girls in the secretarial pool.
Well, what, you don't like that?
I don't dislike it. As I say, it brings me back to my childhood. But I'm just curious about the inspiration behind it. I mean, are you or somebody on the board big Mad Men fans or something?
Absolutely, I love Mad Men.
That explains a lot. Explains a lot. And do you find that they're not having modern communication devices in the secretarial pool improves their effectiveness?
Absolutely. I'm very anti-technology when it comes to education and a lot of that stuff, because people just play games. Solitaire, all that stuff.
They play games now in the secretarial pool, and they play them with cards.
But it's more social.
I guess.
They're developing social skills.
They don't seem too upset or annoyed. They seem happy enough, but it just, I don't know, those bouffants always give me kind of a turn.
Okay.
I have nothing against bouffants. Listen, my favorite Aunt Ginny, she still wears a bouffant. She has we used to say before I saw the secretarial pool, the family joke was that she had the world's only remaining bouffant in captivity.
Okay.
So, but she's got to run for her money now with all the girls in the secretarial pool. Do you think those are real, or do they wear wigs?
I think those are real.
All right, well, you know better than I do.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's move on. First, I'd like to mention that you can download all of our episodes through iTunes. I understand a lot of people want to listen through their cell phone or mobile device, whether it's at work, in the car, wherever. So now you can you go to the iTunes podcast area, and there you can get it. Shout out to Patreon again. We had yet another patron pre-show that was around 40 minutes. That's like a whole nother episode. So I'm sure the patrons enjoyed it. So get access to the pre-show and more for as little as $1 a month. There you go.
Wow.
All right, time for the memes. Are you ready, Charles, for the memes of production?
Are they being nationalized, or are they still in private hands?
We need to nationalize them, and we need to secure them. We can't trust anybody else with the memes.
All power to the People's Soviets of workers and peasants.
Yes. All right, let's do it. Let's start off with the China thing. We got freedom of speech button and the Chinese money button.
Oh, I know which one I'm pushing.
You're pushing the Chinese money button.
You got it. You got it. I mean, it's like Chinese money, Cinderella's glass slipper. Which one?
Wow.
No, I'm just saying. Just saying.
It's been, I like this whole thing because it's sort of like with Trump winning the presidency, you get to pull back the curtain and see how media really is. Well, so too with all these corporations, where with this Chinese issue, we get to pull back the curtain and really, really see if these people have any values or if it's all money. It's easy to have values. It's easy to raise awareness when it doesn't cost you anything. But when it's like a significant portion of your business is on the line to stick up for any sort of values, then do you have that? Then what do you do?
You got Chick-fil-A. No, I have to tell you, and I say this out of sheer horror at what you're saying.
What?
Yes. Let me tell you something. America's business has only the best interests of this country at heart. Haven't you? And that's true, by the way, if it's labor or capital. You read the websites of either or both the American Manufacturers Association or, contrariwise, the AFL-CIO. Both of them will tell you how both capital and labor in this country are only out for the best of for this nation, for the good of this country. Yeah. And you know what else? You read any of the websites of any of the professional organizations by media people. That's the same thing. They are out for what will help this country. Yes. You read the websites of the Republican and Democratic parties. Read the websites of any major journal, of any major newspaper, any major of the networks. Read all their websites, and they'll all tell you how they are entirely consecrated to doing what is best for these United States and this world and their denizens. That's right.
Absolutely. You know, you kowtow to China and you get more of that money, and that's more money in the hands of the government. So there you go.
Excuse me, I don't think I've read anything like that on the self-descriptions in the websites of the organizations I mentioned.
Oh.
Have you ever actually taken the time to look at the websites of the American Manufacturers Association or the American Federation of Labor not Central Intelligence, the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations? These two groups represent the best of American business, capital and labor. Have you ever gone there and looked at their sites? They will both show you how they're doing the best they can for these United States and their denizens, to say nothing of the other nations of the world. And not just them. Look at all of our media outlets' websites. They will all describe to you how they're serving the public, serving the people. And that's not all. Look up the websites of the political parties. Yes, and the major universities. The National Association of Governors, the National Association of Mayors. Look up all of these websites, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. You look at their self-descriptions on their websites, and you will realize how every organization in this nation, public, private, or any mixture thereof, religious, civil, economic, veterans, hereditary, they're all of them pulling together to make a better future for us and our descendants. And you see fit to denigrate that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm just pointing out that they have their side of the story.
And you hire their PR people.
Oh, gosh, yes. I'd like to be one of their PR people.
Yeah.
Woof. In the immortal words, and by the way, a shout out to everyone who reminded me that it was John Waters. Last week I mentioned that I couldn't remember his name. John Waters, who gave us Hairspray and such wonderful things. He was the one who said, "I'd have sold out years ago if I could only have found someone willing to buy." Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Push that Chinese money button. The business of America is business, ladies and gentlemen.
There we go. All right, next meme we got.
Okay.
From Peter the Trad Cat. Sleeping on the job, not good, says Charles. And it shows me sleeping, and then you say, "See what I told you about this guy."
That is so unkind.
It is. I mean, it is unkind.
To think that I would alert anyone to the fact that you were asleep. Never.
I know, because it gives a false impression. I'm only sleeping because I work so hard.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't like the way you said that, Charles. I don't like.
No, I'm agreeing. You work real hard. Sure. No, I agree, boss. You work hard, yeah.
Okay, good. That's what I like.
You bet.
That's what I like to hear. Needs a little work, but you're improving, Charles. You're improving.
I'm trying my best, boss. I'll be a good boy.
Okay. Yeah, not fully housebroken yet, but we're getting there.
You just keep them. Yeah, you can't argue with progress, can you? Okay, boss. What else we got?
Okay, next one. Charles bringing the plight of the Tumblr House workers to the attention of the executives. Like, And then it's a picture, that famous picture of Martin Luther, I guess, nailing his theses to the door. And yeah, so you're Martin Luther. How do you like that, Charles? You are Martin Luther, bringing about reform, quote unquote.
Yeah, well, that might make you the corrupt old Renaissance cardinal. You wouldn't like that, now would you?
I mean, corrupt. I mean, what is the corrupt cardinal selling? Indulgences? You can't even give those away for free now. What, the year of
No.
the year of mercy? Like, who did that? Like, hardly anyone did that. We were one of the few people who actually took advantage of that. I mean,
I did.
Yeah, but I mean, the idea of selling indulgence, no one even cares about indulgence anymore. We're all perfect in one way or the other.
How about buying annulments instead?
See, there you go. Buy annulments. That's much more lucrative, I bet.
See? Ask Uncle Ted McCarrick. He knew all about it.
Yeah, I should.
Speaking of a corrupt old Renaissance cardinal.
Now.
What?
Okay.
Well, he wasn't Renaissance. He didn't have anything like their taste.
There you go. Okay, next meme. It's a picture of Spider-Man, Tom Holland. Everywhere I go, I see her face. It's got a picture of the is that the name of the pagan idol that they have?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Don't get me going Amazon on you again like I did last week. Humba junga bala bumba humba jumba wala ha huja bumba humba cha cha. What?
Yeah, we got to watch out. You get in that Amazon mood. It's hard to get you out of it.
Well, us elderly white guys have an affection for the Amazon. Everyone who lives there would like to get out of it. But, if you're fantasizing about it your whole life, you dream of going up the river in a tramp steamer, and with your 3 Indian wives and all that. So I can see where Cardinal Casper's coming from.
Okay. Last one is from Tom Balistrieri. He says, "Why, yes, I do favor a monarchy. Why do you ask?" And it's Charles Coulombe and Henry VIII garb, it looks like.
That is so unkind. I mean, I don't mind it when you're the butt of these things, but when I made the joke, it's very upsetting.
You don't want to be Henry VIII?
No, I don't want to be Henry VIII.
You were pretty chill with being Martin Luther a second ago.
Well, that was because you got to be a corrupt old cardinal. I don't see you getting abused for this at all. I mean, I just see me sitting there like Henry VIII. One of the things I find American Catholics, and this does not necessarily affect Mr. Balistrieri, I'm just mentioning it, is that Henry VIII is their go-to guy for trying to discredit monarchy.
Yeah.
It's always Henry VIII. Oh, yeah? Well, how about Henry VIII? Well, gee, I don't know. How about St. Louis? How about St. Ferdinand? Why don't we talk about them? What about Henry VIII? I don't know. How about Henry VI? Or St. Edward the Confessor? Or Blessed Charlemagne? Or Blessed Constantine XI? Or, oh, heavens to Betsy, how about St. Humbert of Savoy? Yeah, but what about Henry VIII?
Did you? What was that? You just put a cigarette butt on your tongue? What was that?
No, I put a finger up my gut to show that I vomitos hearing about Henry VIII in these discussions.
There you go. Okay.
Forget Henry VIII. You come up with another go-to guy as an evil monarch, but an evil self-described Christian monarch, of course. It's no good throwing Nero or Genghis Khan at me. Get rid of Henry VIII, and who have you got left? Oh, I know, George III, because of the Quebec Act. I mean, wait a minute. Oh, never mind.
All right.
Well, let's see. So that's the end of the memes of production, which I guess means we have to go on to the questions.
Yes. I do want to apologize first and for all the. We're having a lot of latency issues on this, so everyone, we're well aware we have latency issues. We're just trying to get through this best we can. All right.
I just think it's a miracle of modern technology that we're able to be sitting in our respective places 6,000 miles from each other and present you with any kind of a show at all. It's astonishing.
Yeah. Miracle of modern science. Okay. Now, two questions. The first two questions are from me.
Oh,
Everybody, even the big money men, got to take a back seat to me.
you?
The one suit to rule them all.
One suit to find them. One suit to bring them all, and on the internet bind them.
Yes.
In the land of Tumblr, where the secretaries dwell.
This is my show. My own.
Ooh. You talk pretty big for somebody who's afraid to go to the elevator every other day.
I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, I bet you don't.
All right, so first question from me.
All right.
I was driving home the other night, listening to music on the radio, in an oldies station, and on came Pink Floyd with their song, We Don't Need No Education.
Hey, teacher, leave those kids alone.
Exactly.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So I was thinking about the themes of that song, the context, the time period. The message is pretty bold and confrontational. But then it occurred to me that that song is actually more relevant for our own time than ever before. Yet we don't have this...
All in all, it's just another brick in the wall.
Exactly. But we don't have the same sort of countercultural activism in music, even though it's more appropriate for our time. We don't have Bob Dylan type musicians talking about how the times are a-changing. Why do you think that is?
Well, there are several reasons. Firstly, it's because the people who are animated by that music now run the show. You know, the people who are rocking out and feeling inspired by the wall and the times they are changing are now running the place.
Well, that's true, but at that time they weren't running the show. They were just a bunch of kids. So how is it that they got played back then? Whereas now,
they got played back then because they were pretty catchy, and they really reflected the time. You got to bear in mind that, how do I put this? They were also formed, they benefited from what had come before. They were, in many ways, the wealthiest and best educated generation this country ever produced. Well, that country, the one you're in. The generation of 68 over here was a little bit different because where our boomers were formed by affluence, the generation of 68 here was formed by immediate post-war poverty. You know, rambling around the wreckage of their childhood. Whereas ours, they were spoiled, and not unlike the Vatican II people, who by dynamiting the church's educational system ensured that we would never have that many people as fluent in Latin and Greek again in the ranks of the higher clergy. So too with that era. The very act of their taking over and changing things to fit themselves ensured that we would never have the same sort of talents develop. I mean, they got what they wanted, and what they wanted was crap. And now they run the show and they force it down everyone's throats. And what are you going to sing? You know, a protest against gay marriage? Who's going to play that? An anti-abortion lyric? That's not going to make the top 10. Promise you that.
Well, there's a certain poetic lyrical style where you're not putting abortion directly in the lyrics. You attack it from a vague, with vague wording where
it still wouldn't fly.
Okay. Well,
And part of the problem too, so I'm speaking specifically about the United States. It's interesting that in Europe and Latin America, to a degree, things like folklore and folk music, etc., were very much the preserve of conservatives. Not entirely, but to a great degree. Whereas in America, in the States, all that stuff fell into the hands of the left because conservatives were too busy making money. And that was American conservatism, which was really, as Gary Potter put it so well, the right wing of the national liberalism. I mean, there were a lot of different phenomena that fed into the perfect storm of drivel we have now. And the thing is, unlike the church, the state and society having these guys shuffled off to their grave, what's going to replace them? I don't see any great, and I could be wrong, of course, but I don't see any great artistic replacement. What I see is decline and decay, and I can't begin to think of what would pull us out of it. And this is a cultural problem, a political problem that's throughout the West. When I was in Czechia earlier this year, I happened to watch Czech television, and I ran across a band, Ondřej Havelka and his Melody Makers. Ondřej being spelled Ondrej, which is what your Czech cousins, that's how they spell Ondřej.
Okay.
But it's a revival thing, like like the Cicada Club in LA, or Alex Mendham in London, or Max Rabe in Germany. In other words, they're a sort of a jazz swing revival band. They're very good, all Czech, but a lot of their lyrics they sing either in English or in Czech, songs that were big in Czechoslovakia between the wars. I mention them because if you go to their website, he has a very heartfelt thing about how, like everyone, he's hoping for the next artistic, philosophical wave to come along and save us. He says, but how do you keep from going insane until that time?
Yeah.
And he says the only thing he knows how to do is to go back to the last time, as far as he's concerned, the music was really very good. And play that sort of music as authentically as possible. I was very touched by it, actually.
Yeah.
And I became quite the Ondřej Havelka fan to go with the other bands I mentioned. But in truth, we have not inevitably, that is to say, I don't think it was predestined, it didn't have to be this way, but we have become an exhausted culture. And you can see it in architecture, you can see it in poetry, you can see it in music, you can see it in theater. There's a reason why old music now outsells new music.
I didn't know that.
It's a surprise for you. So there's a reason why cassettes and vinyl are selling, which is crazy. It's true.
Okay.
So, I mean, there is, I think, an unconscious yearning, an unconscious nostalgia for something better. And unfortunately, church, state, society, and culture are not in a position for anyone to say, you're right, there is something better, here it is.
Yeah. Because I think music is an important, it's often overlooked. We're so, I think, we think about television, we think about books, think about movies a lot, but music kind of gets skipped over. There's not a lot of literature on the impact of music. And
I agree 100%. Our friend Bill Busak, of course, recommends highly a book about the genesis of rock and roll called The Triumph of Vulgarity. But, one of the things about, and I'm going back to the early 60s, pre-Beatles rock and roll, it was fun.
Yeah, like Buddy Holly.
Like Buddy Holly. like Dickie Lee, like oh gosh, I mean I could go on and on. There was a joyousness to it.
The way I say it, or the way I've heard that I like the most, is it's music that brings you up that builds you up instead of brings you down.
Yeah, and also, I mean, a lot of it is music specifically for teenagers, but it exalts all the high point in being a teenager. I mean, if you could remember back to that time, I know you're very elderly, but if you could remember back to that time, you're young, you're in the first flush of life, everything seems new and exciting. You fall in love for the first time, you do everything for the first time. And there's just this thrill to being alive. Well, so much of the music of that time captured that perennial thrill.
Yeah.
And this was brought home to me, believe it or not, at my 10-year reunion from high school. I don't want to say when it was, but it was 1988. So, yeah, that tells you when I graduated from high school. Anyway, the music of the 70s, the music of my time, I hated. Disco and just garbage. But my classmates, many of whom had really enjoyed the music of our time, had come not to like it so much. Well, there's this 19-year-old DJ playing this stuff, and pretty soon the entire dance floor was empty, and everybody was in the hallways of the hotel to escape this stuff. I remember one girl saying to me, I played this record to death when I was 16, but I can't stand it now. And what they all wanted to hear was something from the 50s and early 60s, because it captured the mood, the perennial mood of a high school reunion. Bittersweet or the great thrill, one or the other.
Yeah.
And, I went in and I said to the kid, who was oblivious to the fact that it was all by himself now, that whole ballroom was empty and he was just spinning tunes, He was into it. And I looked at him, I said, do you have anything else? Look around you. Nobody wants to hear this stuff. And he says, but mister, wasn't this the music of your era? Hugged my head in shame and walked out. And I told my classmates what he had told me, and they all went,
Hey, you boomers.
Junior boomers.
Whatever.
Because, see, the music you were liking was a little bit earlier. The Wall. And, of course, I know your favorite to rival The Wall in its depth is Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody.
Whatever. No, I don't like that song. I mean, it's okay. I like Hotel California. You know who I really like nowadays? The modern band. One of your nephews likes. Your nephew Michael. I like Mumford and Sons a lot.
Mumford and Sons.
You know that they're kind of like a folk style band. They do the banjo a lot, and it's songs that lift you up. And
he's played it for me.
Yeah,
he's played it for me, but not Green Day, huh?
No, not Green Day.
So what you're telling me is that sitting there high atop the Tumblr Tower, you're not an emo.
No. Sorry, buddy.
Gosh. Okay, well, we've got that out of the way. You're not an emo. That's something. This could be on a headline somewhere. Tumblr House president comes out. I am not an emo.
I think we're already past that. Like, the emo thing, that's like... I think that got started with, like, Linkin Park and some of these other, like, bands, where they have this certain singing tone that's just like, shut up.
What about Limp Bizkit?
Limp Bizkit is a little bit before. Limp Bizkit's, like, late 90s, early 2000s. I don't like Limp Bizkit at all.
What about
that's like the white trash. That's like the white trash era of rock and roll with Limp Bizkit and Kid Rock and Eminem and Eminem's all this. It's just a lot of. Ugh.
What about MC Hammer?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, MC Hammer. Yeah, too legit to quit. Am I right?
We have to pray. We have to pray just to make it today.
I don't know how that happened. I don't know how he happened.
Well, look, as far as music goes, I just want you to know that a long, long time ago, I could hear that music used to make me smile. And I knew that if I had the chance, I could make those people dance, and maybe they'd be happy for a while. But February made me shiver with every paper I deliver. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step. I can't remember if I cried when I read about his widowed bride. But I really got to tell you something. Something touched me deep inside the day the music died.
I know.
Can you guess what I started singing?
Yeah, Miss American Pie. It took me a while.
Yes, that's what I started singing.
My brother, he might have got this from you. My brother was trying to convince me. This was a long time ago, too. I don't know how I remember this, because this was like 20 years ago, this discussion. He was making an argument how Miss American Pie was in actuality a reference to Vatican II.
Part of it is, I think. I think what he's done is all through it, he's conflated his personal situation with the situation of the world at the time. So it starts out with Buddy Holly, touches on, I think, the JFK assassination, the Altamont Music Festival, Vietnam. It's all in there in different places. But I think that the Vatican II reference comes at the very end.
What is that?
Well, he's tried everything else. He's tried music, politics, and all that. And finally, and I went down to the sacred store where I'd heard the music years before. But the men there said the music wouldn't play. And in the streets, the lovers screamed, the children wept, and the poets dreamed. Not a word was spoken. The church bells all were broken. And the three men I admire most, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, they caught the last train for the coast the day the music died. And so, in that reading, the day the music died becomes not simply the death of Buddy Holly, etc., but everything else that happened over the next decade. 58 to 68.
Don McLean was Catholic, right?
I believe so. Raised Catholic, as we say in the industry.
Okay.
Well, the implication is always that he wised up. That's why today I say, well, Pope Francis was raised Catholic.
Now that you say that, I do see that a lot. Raised Catholic, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The implication being that they're no longer so. I mean, I was raised Catholic. I've never stopped it, but
okay.
You were raised Catholic.
Yeah.
So it's great because you can say that to cast doubts on someone's faith without appearing to do so.
Yeah. Okay, next question, shall we?
Yep.
From me.
Yep.
All right.
You already had one. You are greedy. You think just because you produce this show and keep it on the air, you get some kind of special privileges. Well, you're right. What do you want?
See, you're learning. All right. This is a question from a passage I came across in the Bible from 2 Kings chapter 2. It's on Elisha. And he, being Elisha, went up from thence to Bethel. And as he was going up by the way, little boys came out of the city and mocked him, saying, "Go up, thou bald head. Go up, thou bald head." And looking back, he saw them and cursed them in the name of the Lord. And there came forth 2 bears out of the forest, and tore of them 42 boys. So, what's going on here? Is Elisha just being fickle and having these boys mauled because they called him a name?
Sounds like he was going tactical.
Tactical? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, I said he's going tactical.
Yeah.
He's going medieval on the derrieres.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to be fooled with no prophet of the Lord.
I mean, so
Hope we
that's
don't play
not
that.
fickle though. Like you call him a name, and suddenly judgment upon you is two bears come out of the forest and they tear you limb from limb. Is that?
Maybe you needed it. Don't forget, he was a prophet, and he knew what kind of juvenile delinquents they were going to grow into. You think it was going to stop with just assaulting an old man and calling him names? Not likely. Next thing you know, they'd be stealing hubcaps and sniffing glue. Yeah. And then they'd turn to major crime. First burglary and pot. And then they'd be selling drugs and assaulting people.
Is that predestination?
Not if you see it happening as it happens.
How do you see
Anyway,
past free will happening like that?
Because he knew where they were going to take their free will.
How do you know?
Because he could see through the eyes of God where everything is now.
Gosh, the Old Testament was just so brutal.
Well, they needed it.
Why'd they need it?
Because they were nasty, unlike us.
Yeah, we need it just as much, but we don't have the same deal going on in the New Testament. Like, I still don't understand the differences.
Well, you got to bear in mind, for one thing, that the incarnation radically changed everything. For one thing, you can go to heaven now, and that really wasn't possible before Christ ascended to heaven. That's the first thing. The second thing is that there certainly was much more justice in the world because there was so much infamy. Bad as things are now, they were worse then. And I'm only half joking when I say what I say about the kids. I'm sure they had some foreknowledge of what they would have done with their lives had they lived. Or contrary-wise, I'll give you a more modern thing, and not by a prophet. Do you remember a fellow named Bernhard Goetz, who was attacked by a group of youths on the subway?
No.
Well, this is back in the late 70s, and he became kind of a folk hero because, in those days, before Mayor Giuliani, you went on the subway, you were definitely taking your life in your hands.
Yeah, New York in the 70s, New York City in the 70s is developing an infamy about how terrible it was.
It was pretty bad. So the muggings on the subway were just regular occurrences. So there was this kind of dweeby-looking white guy named Bernhard Goetz, and he didn't like the threat of being robbed or beaten or murdered anymore. That kind of lost its appeal to him. So he went on the subway packing, and when the youths attacked him to get his money, he blew them away. Now, didn't kill them, but he sent several of them into the hospital and all that. As I recall, there were 3 or 4 of them. One of them ended up in a wheelchair for life. He was the only one who didn't go to prison for greater crimes later.
So, and what's the moral of the story, though? See, I mean...
Well, the moral of the story is that I have no doubt that Elisha knew where they were headed. He saved the world, a trio or a quartet or a quintet, however many there were, of obnoxious, annoying scoundrels.
Okay, so that's God's justice right there.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Now, mind you, Bernhard Goetz is probably not a prophet of the Almighty in my estimation.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty safe bet that if a group of youths are going to try to mug you on the subway, their ultimate futures are probably not going to be that rosy either.
Okay.
I mean, stop and think. In the Jewish society of that time, going after the elderly and insulting them like that was a huge taboo.
Oh, okay. Well, that adds greater context. So it's not some small thing. That's
no.
Okay.
You don't assault and insult elderly people. That's terrible. You don't do that.
Okay.
And if they were able to do that at that age, I'm sure they would have grown up into something worse.
Okay. Okay, let's get on to everyone else's questions now. Now that we're done with mine.
Oh boy. All right, everyone. Those of you who took a number, pull it out. We're back in line now.
All right, next two questions are from Brian.
Hello, Brian.
Charles, in the Old Testament, Elias was taken by a fiery chariot into heaven. I thought the assumption of Mary, body and soul, was a unique privilege. However, I have also heard that Saint Joseph was as well, though the more common opinion seems to be he went to the limbo of the fathers. God can do as he wills, though of course he is not the despotic God Muslims worship, who is all will. So why was Elias allowed into heaven before the crucifixion when so many other holy prophets were not?
Well, that's a good question. Also, the fact that he was brought up while he was living. And he's not the only one. So was the prophet Enoch. They both were taken up to heaven, not simply body and soul the way Our Lady was, but while still alive. Now, as far as St. Joseph goes, and the other people of the other just of the Old Testament, they were brought up to heaven. Souls, anyway. Joseph, it's a belief that he may have been brought up with his body, but certainly his soul and everyone else's in the limbo of the just were taken up at the ascension. But the thought that it might have been bodies as well is suggested by the passage of Scripture where it mentions that the bodies of the saints arose at the crucifixion and were seen by many. And so the thought was that these were the bodies of the just, and they arose and went on up. So there's, of course, the question, what were they doing between the time our Lord left hell and the time he arose? Well, who knows? I wasn't there. And similarly, I'm afraid I cannot tell you why God does these things. There is a belief that Enoch and Elias will return at the end of time to preach against the Antichrist, only to be executed by him. At which point they will then ascend to heaven without their bodies. But who knows? I don't. And I wasn't back then, and with any luck, I will die before the end of the world, so I won't have to see the tribulations and trials. What I've already seen has been enough for me, and I don't mind it at all if God decides to spare me any, future problems.
Okay, second question from Brian. Charles, what is your favorite favorite style of architecture? I know you have a soft spot for Rococo. Personally, if I had to pick a favorite, I would say Gothic, but I also love Romanesque and Byzantine. As far as least favorite goes, of course, I hate brutalism, but I also find neoclassicism dull and uninspiring, like the Enlightenment, or rather the darkening context it sprang from.
Well, that's a very good question, but I have to agree with you. I mean, as far as brutalism goes, I despise it. My favorite style of architecture, I would tend toward the Gothic, and believe it or not, the Neo-Gothic. But I love Baroque, I love Rococo, I love Art Nouveau, I love Art Deco, I love Romanesque. I don't mind neoclassical. It's as you say, it's a bit dull, but it can be impressive if it's done well, if it's done right. The Beaux-Arts style I like, the Historicist style. I mean, it's far easier for me to say what I like than what I dislike. Because there's so much I like. So much depends on the context, the setting, etc. I really think that you saw a kind of organic development in architecture, complete with revivals. I mean, colonial revival is another thing I'm very fond of, including also Spanish and Spanish revival, Mission revival, Monterey colonial, Dutch colonial revival. There's, where does it end? Any of those styles, when done well, are great. Brutalism is the only thing I think that you just can't do anything with. It's blocks of garbage. And part of this eclecticism, I have to say, is kind of encouraged by having been raised in Los Angeles. And the reason why I say that is because the golden age of quick building in LA was from about 1920 to 1940. In those 20 years, the city expanded from being this little area around downtown to the behemoth it is now. And they threw up buildings as quickly as they could. And it was a cornucopia of a pantheon of styles, often with no rhyme or reason to each other. So, you've got French Chateau next to Art Deco, next to Colonial Revival. Now, I mean,
yeah,
it just doesn't make any sense. And yet, it works. It works in a lot of ways, and this is where I have to give Los Angeles a bit of credit. It was one of the last gasps of Western civilization prior to the Second War. And everything ended up falling there. There's an old joke, that the reason why there's so many weird people in LA is because the whole country is actually tilted, or the whole world. And so all the nuts and fruits and flakes land in LA. Well, whether or not that's true of people, it certainly was true then of architectural styles. I don't think there's a single architectural style that was not represented in large numbers in LA, from Romanesque to Art Deco. They're all there. And some very peculiar syncretistic things. I don't know if you've ever seen our library downtown LA. But that thing, it works. It's a beautiful building. But it's got Moorish, it's got Art Deco, it's got Babylonian. I mean, it is the most syncretistic thing you can imagine.
Yeah.
But it really works. It's bizarre. And I love it. It's one of my favorite buildings, full stop. The same for our City Hall in LA, which is a strange combination.
It's not Art Deco?
It's Art Deco with features grabbed from other things. I mean, it's got like a ziggurat at the top.
That's true, actually. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then it's got that red beacon. Do you know what the red beacon was for?
No.
You're going to laugh. Do you remember the movie The Rocketeer?
Yeah, in the 90s, early 90s.
Yes. And you recall that a German dirigible came to L.A.
Yeah.
In The Rocketeer. That didn't happen in real life, but it was a play on what was supposed to happen. Had the Hindenburg not gone down, it was planned to open regular traffic, dirigible traffic, between Lakehurst, New Jersey, and L.A. And the depot in L.A. was going to be City Hall. And that beacon was to light the way for them. That's why when you go up to the very top, which is now the Tom Bradley meeting room or whatever it's called, that was to be the depot. And when you realize that, you look around the room, the design of it, the shape, they all suddenly make sense because you could see it as a public waiting room. The other movie they used that motif in was Sky Captain of the World of Tomorrow. Another 90s thing, I think.
Yeah.
But at any rate, that was LA's glorious future that never happened.
That was never going to it was never going to be like a landing depot for blimps.
That was what it was designed for.
That's ridiculous. That's the air traffic with all the skyscrapers in the area. That's impossible.
They didn't have skyscrapers. City Hall was the tallest building. It was illegal in those days to build anything taller than City Hall.
You're not going to have aircraft going through downtown.
Not today. But in those days, we're talking about blimps. We're not talking about jets.
Jets?
And you've got the Goodyear blimp going through there all the time.
Well, blimps are even bulkier. I mean...
But there were no, you don't understand, there were no skyscrapers.
I guess it's nice and slow. I guess the blimp is nice and slow.
It's slow, right? And there were no skyscrapers. City Hall was the tallest building in Los Angeles. It was illegal to build anything taller.
Let me ask you this. How long would the trip be from New Jersey to L.A. via blimp?
Probably a couple nights, the way it was for transatlantic. Quicker and more pleasant than train.
Okay.
See, the problem is you're looking at it through what you know today.
It's just weird thinking of City Hall as a landing station for blimps.
They thought it was a great idea. I'll tell you something else. They had those blimps, those dirigibles, they had pianos.
Why don't we do that now? Why don't we have like small mini blimps instead of cars, and then we'll just
the mini blimps.
We can escape.
I'm working on it.
No, because I thought of that because like in all these futuristic movies, you know, all the traffic is in the air, right? So let's get off these freeways. Let's get off the 10 and the 210 and the 605 and all, the 405, all these hellacious freeways, and let's get in the air, shall we?
Well, I'd love to. I do like, by the way, how this worldwide show that literally has fans across the globe has gotten so local just in the last few seconds.
And that's fine. What? We're the center of the world right now.
Yeah, so we think. You know, I always tell people that you've been in LA too long when you're in a particularly picturesque setting. You know, a beautiful building or something natural, whatever. And your first thought is, wow, this looks like a movie set. Yeah. You have to be reminded, no, movie sets reflect reality, not the other way around. But you've lived in LA too long when that happens.
Yeah. All right, let's move along. This is going to be a 3-hour episode if we continue at this rate.
All right, let's go.
Next 2 questions are from Nate.
Okay, Nate.
What does Charles think of the mythical land of Hyperborea? Was the actual location of the Garden of Eden in the mythical north, or does it account for the Indo-European hypothesis? I would appreciate an answer even if it is just speculation.
Well, that's good, because that's all it is. I really couldn't tell you. I don't know. I wasn't there. The Garden of Eden supposedly was in Mesopotamia, but I wasn't there either. Hyperborea, it could be. I mean, certainly there's a lot we don't know about prehistory.
What is Hyperborea?
It's a region in the far north where various heroic figures were supposed to come from.
Based on what? Scandinavian mythology? What mythology?
Greek, ultimately. I think Hyperborea was where some peoples or other was supposed to live. I forget now. But I would not be surprised if it was perhaps some vague racial memory from whencever the Indo-Europeans came. And of course, the whole Indo-European thing is quite interesting because it's a huge people, from the Irish to the Bengalis. It's a big tribe.
Yeah.
Now, of course, who they were, what they were, people speculate based on linguistic evidence, on archaeology, but it's all speculation. Nobody really knows. I certainly don't.
Okay, Nate's second question. I'm writing a term paper in my Western Civ class about Julius Caesar and the fall of the Roman Republic. Given he was one of the 9 worthies of old Catholic chivalry and admired by the likes of Dante, why do you think Catholics who are Anglo-American conservatives, like the imaginative conservative crowd, decry him and love the Roman Republic? When did this ahistorical myth of the liberty-loving Roman Republic begin? Was it with Shakespeare's play or something else? It is clear that Caesar was far from perfect, but was a typical military genius with a great deal of courage and natural virtue.
Hey, hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has got to go. I just thought I'd contribute that. Well, it's a very good question, and the answer is, I don't think it comes from Shakespeare, because Caesar is presented as an honorable man. My suspicion is that it comes from an attachment, it's reading backwards, it comes from an attachment to the American Republic, whose founders, of course, quite consciously modeled themselves on ancient Rome. Hence, the classical style of architecture in our Capitol buildings and other civic structures. I mean, you'll even see Washington dressed as a Roman. You know, we identified very much with that. The Roman Republic was found in revolting against the kings of Rome, and then fell into the hands of a strongman, Caesar, and ended up once again as a monarchy. Well, this kind of thing was very hateful and indeed fearful to the founders of the Republic and to its adherers ever since. Because, of course, the biggest thing they're afraid of is, on some level, I'm not saying this is conscious, is that the thing will break into pieces and be pulled together by a Caesar. And that, that is a tremendous fear. And if you feel that the United States of America's system of government is the end-all and be-all, the last best hope of mankind, the shining city on the hill, etc., then the Roman precedent is nothing short of frightening. If, on the other hand, you think in terms of the Holy Empire and the Sanctum Imperium and all that kind of stuff, then Caesar ultimately becomes the forerunner of something much better than what it replaced. It's a little bit like Danny DeVito in L.A. Confidential saying about the LAPD, how can there be organized crime in a city with the finest police department in the world? Well, similarly, since the Roman Republic was a foreshadowing of the American Republic in this narrative, its end must have been a huge catastrophe. And just as the transformation of our republic into anything else would doubtless be an enormous catastrophe. In that reading, I don't say it's objectively true, but I do say there are people who fervently believe it with all the fervor of a religion. Because it is. The religion of the country, the American civil religion, ceremonial deism, if you want to call it that, it was the faith that all of us were brought up in when I was a boy. And it still has a powerful hold in a lot of people.
Okay. Next two questions are from Julian.
Hello, Julian.
With it seeming like monarchs in Europe are becoming so liberal, why should we keep fighting for them? I have been a monarchist since I was 10. I'm 29 now. This question is in reference to the King of Netherlands pushing for more equality for LGBT in a talk at the UN a few weeks ago. So why should we keep fighting for them?
That's a very good question. And the answer is threefold. Firstly, the office is more important than the man. And if you get rid of the office, what do you have? Secondly, what would you replace it with? Whatever came would be worse. That's one thing that even monarchies I would not have wanted to live under, like the Ottoman Empire and the Chinese Empire proved, is that inevitably, even a bad monarchy is replaced always by something worse. And I would rather avoid that if one could. Thirdly, in the case of Christian/Catholic monarchy, as opposed to a form of government with Masonic roots or cooked up on the spot or whatever you like, it's something whose background is Catholic. And presumably, as society changes, if at some point a given country gets a citizenry worthy of a better king, they'll have one. I mean, it's like the church. Let's pretend for a minute that the Pope was not everything we wanted. Why should we keep being loyal to the papacy? Well, because it's the only game in town, that's why. Because it's the office, not the man. And believe me, this problem faced people in the Middle Ages. And they understood it in this fashion, and it certainly is good for us Catholics now when we look at a papacy or at bishops that may be less than we like. And it certainly is true of monarchy. They came up with what was called the idea of the king's two bodies, the body natural and the body political. The body natural was the king of the day, who might be good, might be bad. He might be a saint, he might be a worthless sinner. He might be a tremendous man, he might be an idiot. He was whatever he was. But there was the body political, the office of king, the about whom, when a king would die, they would always make the proclamation, the king is dead, long live the king. A king may die, but the crown never dies. Ever.
Okay.
The crown is more important than the man who wears it. And so, you have had throughout history, you have had the spectacle of strange things having to be done to preserve a crown despite the wearer. Magna Carta comes to mind. And it's a funny thing, if you read Magna Carta, as opposed to knowing the history behind it, the rebellion of the bishops and barons forcing the king to concede to them the rights they claimed. You know that. But then you read the text of Magna Carta, and instead of what you think you know, it comes across simply as the king graciously confirming his subjects and their pre-existing rights. So were they lying? No, they weren't lying at all. It's the place of the king to defend the rights of his subjects. If he falls short of that, sometimes he has to be assisted in his job. But they would never have dreamt, A, of overthrowing King John, or B, abolishing the monarchy. That would be like a Catholic abolishing the papacy because the Pope's a schmuck.
Yeah, it's weird because I was talking with my brother about this with Thomas Aquinas in De Regno, where talking about replacing a tyrant monarch. And for some reason, people always read into like, oh, well, when you replace a tyrant monarch, you put in democracy, obviously. Like, obviously, that's what Thomas Aquinas said. How come they make that jump and they don't think of the possibility of replacing a bad monarch with a good monarch?
Well, it's because they read everything into themselves, into their own space. I mean, let's put this another way. If you don't like Trump, or you didn't like Obama, why don't we just abolish the Constitution? You don't like the Supreme Court? Let's rip up the Constitution. Well, why not?
Well, that's unreasonable. Other people's views of what's a tyrant and what isn't are more reasonable.
Yeah, I know. That's why Henry VIII couldn't change the marriage laws. I get it. There was a man who, if he could have put in polygamy, would happily have done so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, that's why. I mean, Julian, I'm not Dutch. But if I were Dutch, I would, of course, not like Willem Alexander doing that. But again, as is always the case, I'm sure he would not have consulted me. The other thing, too, you've got to bear in mind is that the modern constitutional monarchs have fallen for the same thing everyone has, that the political and judicial class speak for the people. We all believe that, or we're supposed to. Now they don't. They speak for their own precious rear ends, except in Ireland, where apparently they do speak for the people. But I'm just going by the referenda, that's all. But for the rest of us, you know, the myth is that the Supreme Court can legislate morality, and we'll go along with it. That, oh, don't get me started. But that's the myth we believe. I have far more hope that one day there'll be a king of the Netherlands who's decent than I have of the Supreme Court ever reversing itself on gay marriage and Roe v. Wade.
Let me ask you a question, a devil's advocate question.
Sure.
All the serious evils in the United States were from non-democratic processes. So shouldn't the goal be to simply make things more democratic? I mean, in California, we voted against gay marriage.
Yes. And it was the courts that threw it out. But see, that's always the case. It's a rigged system. The referendum system exists in California to make us feel as though we matter. Whereas in reality, if our masters don't like it, the courts will always throw it out. It's the way, it's part and parcel of the system.
But why don't we reform the system so that it's more democratic?
Oh,
You're saying it's impossible? It's impossible to do that.
Who's going to be doing it?
Well, we need to empower a strong general, and then he will, like Gladiator. You know, like the end of Gladiator, where
a military coup.
No,
so you're saying we should overthrow the Constitution?
No, I can't say that. But
then what can you say? How are you going to change the system? How would you possibly get the political class to change a system from which they benefit? Who shoots Santa Claus?
It just takes one exceptional figure, Charles.
Except our system does not permit exceptional figures.
I could ask the same thing of your things with monarchy, where how is that going to happen?
Well, I'll tell you, it'll happen the way it did in the past. I looked at Gustav III of Sweden. Oh, now you want me to tell you what that means? What happened is that after the unfortunate reign of Charles XII in the late 17th, early 18th centuries, the kings of Sweden had no power. It was a constitutional monarchy to the max, with two fighting political parties, the hats and the caps. And they basically ran the country to the ground. Well, Gustavus III rose up one day and said, I am king by the grace of God, and you lads are out of a job. And that's what happened. The result was what's called the Gustavian Renaissance. I know you haven't heard about it. Why would you?
But that's bad monarchy to good monarchy.
Well, yeah. Now, how do you do bad republic to good republic?
Now, how do you do bad republic to good monarchy? That's your scenario.
Well, I didn't say that was going to happen. The Netherlands are not a republic. The Netherlands are a monarchy.
But you're hoping, see? So
I'm hoping for a good king.
If you can hope for that, why can't I hope for a pure democratic process?
Because I have a historical precedent, you don't.
Okay.
I mean, the difference is I'm hoping for a strong army. You're hoping for the Nazgul.
What?
Yes. Oh no! Forget the Nazgul. You're hoping for the Valar.
I'm hoping for the Shire, a small, self-ruling government.
Good luck.
But then I guess that makes me a LARPer.
It does.
No, I don't know. I don't know what I hope for.
You're a LARPer.
All joking aside.
Anybody who doesn't accept what we've got as the best possible system because it's given us by our masters is a LARPer. I don't care what you call yourself. I don't care if you think you're a libertarian. I don't care if you think you're a monarchist. I don't care if you think you're a constitutionalist. I don't care what you think you are. Unless you wholeheartedly embrace the system we have now and think it's just the best thing ever to drop on our heads from above, you're a LARPer. And it's even more so for you, because I at least remember a country that didn't have abortion and no-fault divorce. You don't even remember that. Ha, 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 ha. Do you realize you and I could both be pro-life, but you're a LARPer and I'm not?
Why wouldn't you be a LARPer?
Because I remember when abortion was illegal. So it's something I personally can recall. For you, it's just an historical anecdote.
I guess that's true.
It is true. Not only that, you don't remember no-fault divorce. I mean, rather, you don't remember a divorce requiring a fault to be proved. You couldn't get a divorce unless you could prove adultery.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember that. You don't.
Well.
So if you wanted anything approaching marriage laws that gave some kind of stability, you're a LARPer. I'm not. And once my brethren and me go off to the Grey Havens, guess what?
What?
All you LARPers are going to be left behind. But I have good news for you.
What?
As the system continues its stroll down the drain, just wait until you're saying the same thing to somebody 30 years your junior. You were in a time. You want presidents who don't lick dogs in the street. Ha ha ha! You're a LARPer.
I'm still young enough to be youthfully naive that won't happen. I can see it
now. You're going to be like, I can see it now. You kids don't know what it is to not have to dumpster dive for your Sunday dinner. I remember.
No, I'm gonna bring about change. We're gonna get leaders, and we're not gonna take it anymore.
No, just like in Network when it came out in '74.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's what I'm drawing from.
Yeah, I know. Came out in '74. Didn't happen, by the way.
I'm either drawing from that or the Twisted Sister song.
Well, it did happen. Let me change what I'm saying. Network did happen in the sense of where it predicted television would go. That happened.
Yeah, the corporate interests.
But utter crap. Reality TV, all that.
Yeah.
That was all predicted in Network. What we didn't get was Howard Beale, the mad prophet of the airwaves. I want you all to go out to your window, throw open the sash, and shout at the top of your lungs, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. That didn't happen.
Yeah. I'm the Ned Beatty figure in that movie.
Oh.
I'm I get his mind right, and I tell him the way it is.
Yeah, well, all right, fine. I feel a little more like the Faye Dunaway figure, although not nearly as pretty.
I'm not a fan. I don't like her.
The Faye Dunaway?
She's like liberated. She's like the liberated female of the 70s.
Oh yeah, she's horrible. She's horrible. I'm being ironic.
Oh, okay.
You know what Mad Magazine always used to call her?
What?
Because Mad would do these parodies of movies.
What?
And they would change the names of the actors. They always called her Faye Runaway.
Ah.
All right, what do we got next? Let's move along. This is going to be 3 hours if we don't hurry it up.
Yeah. Julian's second question, what do you think will happen to Sweden, Spain, and Belgium, seeing as all of them will have queens? Do you think the royal families will keep going after them?
No idea. I think it was a crazy idea to alter the laws of succession in the first place. That's madness. I think it's madness to have Parliament arrogate that power to itself. I really do.
All of those countries did that?
Yep. I mean, the Crown Prince of Sweden was deprived of his crown princehood when he was like 2 months or something. The crown princess by vote. See this now, of course, as always, England was the ones who started this after the Act of Succession and the so-called Glorious Revolution. But the fact is that dynastic law ought to be the province of the ruling house, not the province of Parliament, any Parliament. But there again, we have the illusion, the delusion straight from the devil that the political class speak for anyone other than their own precious selves. I'd like to make a sort of a trade. The parliaments can determine the laws of succession, and the royals are able to determine the salaries of the parliamentarians. Well, you're all serving for free! Yay! No more tax money to keep you people in mistresses! Yay! Oh, I guess not.
Okay.
The people have spoken.
But not that you're bitter.
No. I love my masters in every possible way.
Okay. Next question is from Gavin. What does it mean that sacred scripture is inspired? When I was a Protestant, this meant that the original autographs were inspired and all faithful copies, thus demonstrating that a given modern translation that was based on faithful copies was everything. But does the Catholic Church have a different approach? Can we say the Vulgate is inspired, for instance, even if we can't strictly say the Vulgate is inspired qua Vulgate? I hope that's not too confusing.
Well, it is, but I'll try to parse it out. Basically, I think what you're asking me is whether or not, if the Vulgate is not an exact translation, is it inspired anyway? Well, the answer is it's still the best translation we have. Why do I say this? Because the Septuagint was not just his primary source for the Old Testament. He also compared the Septuagint to various. Well, let me backtrack. 90 AD was the Synod of Yamia, in which the wise men of the Jewish faith decided to alter the Old Testament that they had, replacing them with the Masoretic texts. The Masoretes were a sort of guild of rememberers. They committed the scriptures to memory. And so they altered the texts, the Old Testament text, primarily to eliminate any references to the Messiah, or to Christ being the Messiah. That is why there are a lot of differences between the Masoretic text and not just the Septuagint, but the remaining pre-Masoretic texts that St. Jerome consulted. Hence the differences between the Masoretic text and the Vulgate. What did Luther and King James and all that use for their Old Testament? The Masoretic texts. You guessed it.
Michael Voris actually makes this exact same point, saying the Masoretic texts were corrupted, and he said this in regard to the Proto-Evangelium, what she shall crush thy head.
Yeah.
So he cited exactly what you just said as well, which was interesting.
I didn't know he had, but there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. What is Fideism? Why was it condemned? Do you know of any Protestants that believe in it? How does it affect America's culture?
Well, Fideism was a condemned philosophy of sorts that basically held, it downgraded reason completely, and held that the only things we could know for sure came from revelation. That was it.
Wow, that's pretty extreme.
Yeah, well, I didn't say it was moderate, did I?
Okay.
It said that...
what time period?
19th century.
Okay.
It was partly, I'm sure it's been thought before, but it became popular in the 19th century in reaction to the Age of Reason, which gave us the French Revolution. There's one thing you'll find in history is that when something goes horribly wrong, there's very often a reaction to it.
Yeah, it makes sense in that context now where you've got Kant trying to arrive at universal principles or universal ethics purely based on reason.
Yeah.
And so that makes sense.
That didn't turn out too well.
No.
So, as is the usual human reaction, other people went to the other extreme. There was a priest, I think his name was Bonetti, but I could be incorrect, who was the best known Catholic Fideist. But when Fideism was condemned, all of its major proponents went along with the condemnation. There were no martyrs for Fideism. As to how it has affected the United States, I suppose you could say that we have a very heavy anti-rational strain in our culture. We manage, we take buzzwords just on faith. Well, we know that the best man always comes out of the voting system. We know that what is legal is moral.
I think that's it's what comes out of the voting system is the will of the people.
But that, as I say, is a bit of a superstition. If you use any reason, you realize that the more ignorant of people, the worse their voting is going to be. The more interested they are, as opposed to in self-aggrandizement, the less interested they are in the commonweal, which is what, at the end of the day, what voting is supposed to benefit, the common good. But the whole concept of the common good is not available to someone who's only thinking about himself. And we live in a society that encourages everyone to do that.
Isn't the common good simply arrived at through taking the aggregate of individual interests?
Nah. If that were true, no, it's not. Because if that were true, it would, there's an old saying, democracy ends as soon as people realize that they can vote themselves other people's money. The system collapses. Now, that's just the way it is. That's why, frankly, I've always been against universal suffrage. I think voting should be based on education and tax paying and property. Why? Because contributors are the ones who should make the decisions. I'll give you a concrete example. Bond issues. Now, do you know what a bond is, as in a bond issue?
Of course, to finance the treasury, what? You buy bonds like war bonds.
Well, yeah, but when you vote a bond issue, the money for the bonds comes out of property taxes.
Okay.
Now, here's the problem. You've seen my house. Do I own my house?
No.
Do I own this apartment I'm sitting in here in Austria?
No.
Do I own any property at all? Any land?
No.
No. Now, when I vote on a bond issue in the city of Monrovia or the county of Los Angeles, state of California, I am deciding what's going to happen to money to be raised from property taxes. But I don't pay property taxes.
Okay, I see. Yeah, you don't have a stake, in a sense.
It's more than that. Let's divide your wallet.
That's a very powerful metaphor.
It's theft. Now, sales taxes are another issue. Why? Because I'm going to be paying them. So I've got every right to vote for or against the sales tax because I'm kicking into it. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, well, let me play devil's advocate, and how about, so you don't own any land, well, wouldn't the nature of democracy, in that sense, be empowering the powerless?
To take other people's stuff.
Inherently egalitarian.
Theft. Well, theft is egalitarian.
Distributing.
Yeah, redistributing according to my desires.
Well, but you're not the ruler, so isn't that? I mean,
no, I'm voting. The ruler is using my vote to stay in power. Because remember, I vote for the man who promises me the most stuff.
That's true.
Yeah, that's who I'm voting for. And I'll tell you a good example of this. Remember the election that gave us Proposition 8?
No.
2008.
Okay.
Easy to remember, it was the Obama presidential election.
Okay.
Now, Imperial County voted overwhelmingly. It was the heaviest of the state for Proposition 8. It also voted overwhelmingly for President Obama.
Okay.
The reason is that most of the voters in Imperial County are Mexican Americans, Hispanics. You present them a clear moral issue, they vote their faith. You present them the weird, strange, mucked up world of sheer politics, and they vote, quote unquote, their pocketbook. If you have a system wherein the majority that are not, shall we say, really kicking in, can take from those who do, well, then you've got a system that's not going to last very long and will eventually be run by total despots. Because they use the people who vote for them, the majorities. They use them shamelessly. They don't deliver. Vote for me. I'm going to give you stuff. Well, now mind you, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be at times redistribution and so on and so forth. But then it's a question of who's going to do it and according to what? What standard? Who decides these things? You know who decided in our society. In our society, it would be decided by the morons that brought you gay marriage and abortion. I assure you their economics will be just as good as their social issues. Because they're really keyed in. Bear in mind, these are people who are too stupid to figure out that if you've got a declining population, your economy is going to suffer, and you won't be able to staff your military. Because they're not smart enough to get that, you see. You've got to understand, we're ruled by jerks.
It's funny though. I love their economic policies. This minimum wage thing. Let's raise the minimum wage to like $20 or whatever. I love saying that's a great idea. We should stop giving foreign aid and just tell these other countries that the solution is simple. Just raise your minimum wage to $20.
Good luck on that. And you see, the problem is, where do they think the money comes from? They say, oh, well, let's soak the rich. How are we going to do that? What percentage of the population are the rich anyway? And let me tell you, you know what happens if you soak the rich? One of two things. Either they stop being rich because you took everything, or they leave.
Yeah. Well, that's already happened in California, I know, with various companies in Silicon Valley. They're setting up in neighboring states in Oregon, Arizona.
Of course.
Yeah.
Listen, I know a couple of big real estate men in the LA area. All that'll happen if they break, if the legislature break Proposition 19, 13, whichever it is, the proposition that keeps them from property taxes from shooting up, and they're in a hairbreadth of doing it. They want to do it for years. Every major real estate individual in the state will dump what he has and go. And you know what that's going to do to the property prices? Yeah. And you know what's going to happen to property tax revenues? Oh, so how the smart guys in Sacramento going to pay? Are they going to peddle themselves on Santa Monica Boulevard? Because that's the only, that's about all they got.
I don't know.
Yeah, neither do they. But at least they're in charge. The problem is giving these morons power is like giving a 16-year-old a gun, booze, and a car. It's crazy.
Okay, I have no idea how we got here from Fideism, but I love it.
Well, let's move on. We'll be here forever. Let's go. What's the next question?
Last question today is from Joseph. I recently read your wonderful ultra-realism frequently asked questions. It is an excellent introduction to the philosophical wisdom of Christianity and the Middle Ages. My question for you is whether you think that, among Orthodox Christian thinkers, the distinction between moderate realism and ultra-realism is often a merely semantic one. For instance, in your FAQ, you list Etienne Gilson among the Thomist moderate realists. But in my own reading of Gilson, his metaphysics seem wholly in harmony with the patristic medieval wisdom that you elsewhere describe as Neoplatonist. It seems as though for believing philosophers, idealistic realism is universally accepted as necessary for a Christian worldview, and Aristotelianism is used more as a tool for rational formalization than as a rejection of idealism. Is it possible that what you describe as ultra-realism, many faithful Thomists would consider a description of their moderate realism, and vice versa? Is there any Christian context in which a rejection of realism is not simply wrong?
Woof! That's a lot to answer.
Yeah, a lot of big words in there.
Yeah, it is. I'm feeling intimidated.
Are you?
Yeah, all the big words.
Yeah.
I always get intimidated with big words. No. I'll answer as best I can. What you say about Gilson is true to a great degree. But you've got to bear in mind that there are a lot of Thomists who think Aristotle is the cat's meow. I can't rehearse their arguments for you. God knows I've read enough of them, but my eyes glaze over sometimes. There are Thomists and there are Thomists, is all I can tell you. St. Thomas himself, I would argue, especially looking at something like the Countercultural, was more of a Neoplatonist than he was a Thomist. But, you do get a bit into semantics with this sort of thing, certainly. As far as the rejection of realism being impossible for a Christian thinker, I would say so. But obviously there are many others who did not. The truth of the matter is that both William of Ockham and especially Abelard, William of Ockham being the great nominalist and Abelard being the great conceptualist, they certainly consider themselves, or were considered by many others, to be deep Christian thinkers. And certainly today's philosophies, modern philosophies, have gone even further. With them, they even reject reality, in a sense. In other words, they say there are no answers to any questions, and bother themselves more with definitions than anything else. I can't see it myself. All I can tell you is it happened this way historically. And I have to emphasize that I always look at these issues from an historian's point of view. I'm not a philosopher or a theologian, even though I'm studying these things at the moment. Not that it's a plug, but I'm an historian, and I go by how people describe themselves. You may critique, you may say so-and-so was not really a Thomist. I don't mean Gilson, but some other character. But if he calls himself one, and other people have described him as one, I tend to call him one.
What's your ruling on Etienne Gilson, as he brought up in his example?
Well, the truth of the matter is that he would be a moderate realist simply because of where he stands on the question of forms and the will versus the intellect. But my questioner is quite right in that he's not nearly as radical in these areas as some other self-described Thomaists.
Okay. Okay, very good. On to the book, finally.
Oh, we got a book.
Okay, so last week we did, what did we do? We did the Exorcist books, where I mentioned that they talk about the importance of confession.
Yes.
Well, let's continue that, shall we? How to Make a Good Confession by Father John Kane.
What's it about?
Oh, what's it about? Well, I tell you what, it's a riveting novel. No, it's just... it's about...
The Endless Knot 5.
Yeah, it deals very much with how to make a good confession. It deals with what's going on spiritually in people, what it feels like, and what your soul is actually going through. Father Kane, one of the things that he talks about, see, whether you haven't gone to confession in years, or you go, very frequently, Father Kane is going to talk about what's going on with you. And for me, I go very frequently, and so he addressed some of the common pitfalls, or the pitfalls of that, what you have to avoid, because things become so commonplace, so routine. It's easy to sort of get used to it, and not despair per se, but for things to feel routine, oh, well, this is how it is.
And to take it for granted.
There it is. That's
and to take and to take your habitual sins for granted.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll never be able to get rid of this, so just,
Yeah. And he talks a lot about, again, what's going on in the soul, which was very fascinating to me, because there's a certain process to the feeling of penitence, where there's sort of a huge, profound feeling in the beginning. But then after that, really, it's a gradual process of penitence. Like, your life becomes, there's a more subtle, what's the word I want to use? Penitence sort of permeates your life as you get older.
It becomes more penitential.
Yeah, it becomes more penitential in general. It's not like a roller coaster. It's just, and so in my short life so far, that seems to be how things are going. I'm sort of probably still in this big transitional thing, but I'm sure you can speak to this.
No, I can't. I mean, it's not that you become more virtuous necessarily. It's just that you become less attached to certain sins, and you don't want to bother with them.
Is it fair to say penitence increases with true self-knowledge? Because I think that's what it is. You're taking the inventory of what you are, and you know what you are, and in knowing what you are, you're more penitential because your assessment is that
you're more aware of your need for absolution. And again, I can't. It's not like I'm just so horrible. It's not like that. On a certain level, it's almost you're just tired of it. You know what I'm saying? You're just, okay. And sometimes you can harness that resisting temptation. Because when you're tempted, you're like, really?
Yeah.
There's nothing sadder than a temptation that no longer tempts. Because then you look back and you're like, gosh, what was I thinking? What?
That's interesting. I don't know if I have that. I don't know if I have anything that qualifies as that.
Not yet. I tell you, I certainly did at your age.
Yeah.
But I do now. And it's Well, believe me, at your age, temptation was doing well. I mean, it's doing well now in general, but I mean, I didn't have any of my specific temptations that were really dead or dying. But as I say, it comes with age, because part of it, too, you confess it a lot. You also see it doesn't go anywhere. You may have had friends die or their lives ruined because of similar, if not identical, temptations. And you get, as I say, a kind of fatigue with it. And as I say, too, you look back and you say, gosh, what was I thinking? How could I have found that tempting? Really?
Yeah.
And, and it gives you more insight into our moral frailty. Because we are such weak creatures. And we gamble our souls for nothing. Just nothing at all. And why do we do it? But the problem is, if you don't attempt to lead something of a penitential life, those sorts of insights will never come to you. Instead, you try to hold on to these things as long as you can. And there's no point to it. This is one of the things that I hate to be vulgar, but it's one of the things I really hate about Viagra. I mean, if that didn't come straight from the devil, I don't know what does. Because here you've got people in their 70s and 80s, 90s, who, at a normal time, as shall we say, that portion of your being settles down somewhat with age, you should be able to get a little more clarity, a little more sanity regarding it. But with this stuff, you're able to stay as stupid as you were at 16, only what's available is far less attractive. It's the worst of both worlds. Can you imagine losing your soul over someone your own age when you're 73?
I never thought of that. That's a great point where, gosh, yeah, I think of these old people like I was. I don't mean to transition from Viagra to Nancy Pelosi, but thinking that's a weird
more
transition.
Than Viagra to
but
make
like
her
there was like
sorry.
she would
take LSD to make her
pretty. She was trending on Twitter, and I think with all these old senators in general who just dedicate their lives to lies and corruption, and they make a home of lies and corruption. Like, I just looked up her age. She's 79. Like, what do you want anymore? Like, at what point do you say, you know what? I've had a good run. Let's get right. You know what I mean? Like,
but you can't, because the problem is the habits you develop early stay with you.
Gosh.
And that's why, I mean, you have deathbed conversions and things like that.
They stay with you if you don't have any penitence in your heart.
No. And again, I mean, there are deathbed conversions. There are all sorts of things like that. And, thank God for it. May there be many more. But for most of us, as the old saying has it, as you practice on Friday, you'll play on Saturday. I mean, just,
I don't know. Like for me personally, like the sting of mortality starts to hit you in the 30s, and it gets you. It increases your humility, and you go through a different process. Like in your 20s and earlier, it's like, oh well, I'm going to live forever, so it's a different mentality.
It does if you're smart. It does if you're humble.
Well, see. It's just
by
weird.
The way,
it's just
intelligence and humility, they go together. Someone who's not smart, who's not really smart, isn't humble. And someone who's not humble isn't really smart.
I don't know. It's just, gosh, it's so weird. I mean, you see, your hairline is growing back a little bit. You've know these gray hairs are soon going to overcome your scalp.
Oh,
and it.
Well, let me tell you something. I see the turkey waddle coming out of my double chins.
Don't say
I
that.
see all sorts of little things that I know in time can kill me. Give me another 10, 15, 20 years. I could well be a wreck. And in my 50s, my friends are dropping like flies. My late 50s.
That too.
Yep.
Where it's like, well, I even, like, there are some people, like, sometimes I watch, I watch certain streamers, and, some people in their 20s and 30s, they're dying. Like, this one guy just had a blood clot. Boom. Out of nowhere. He's dead.
Yeah. Well, the truth of the matter is this is a good season to be talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's autumn. It's the harvest season.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. We always think of the beautiful leaves in New England and elsewhere as the epitome of autumn, and they are beautiful, hypnotically so. But they're dying.
Yeah.
Their most beautiful time is when they're dying. There's a parable there.
That's interesting.
There's a parable there. And then the evergreens, of course, sort of stand out amongst the deciduous trees because they're green and stuff. But and then, of course, they guide us to Christmas and winter. But,
yeah.
It's the harvest season. And it's not just this year's harvest season. The older you get, I mean, it often occurs to me that, in a sense, your 30s are a bit like July. Your 40s are a bit like August. Your 50s are like September. Your 60s are like October. Your 70s like November, and your 80s are like December. If you make it into your 90s, Happy New Year, everybody.
Okay.
But it really does strike me that way. And, next year I'm turning 60, getting ready to leave September for October. And if...
Your favorite month.
Yes, it is my favorite month. And November. It's hard for me to choose between the two.
Okay, well, the best is coming up in any case.
Yeah. And I hope if nothing else, I'm as attractive in my own October as New England is in its. Yeah, fond hope. I don't want to bet on it,
though. Okay, well, let me do a little bit more with this book. Just some of the... at the end, it does all these really sharp questions to help with your examination of conscience. And this is worth the price of the book alone, some of these questions. Do I rely on myself? Do I rely solely on myself and not on God? Do I neglect my duties as a creature to my Creator? Did I fail to profess or defend the faith when required to do so? Let's get some better ones here. Here's a serious one for trads. Have I destroyed or lessened the faith of others by speaking contemptuously about religion, the church, priests, and so forth? Just speaking contemptuously. Do I omit my religious exercises or put them off for no good reason?
Uh-oh. Dun, dun, dun.
Do I fail to wish my neighbor all the good things that I wish for myself? Do I deliberately harbor unkind and revengeful thoughts about others? Have I attributed bad motives to others when I could not be certain of their motives?
Oh, no.
Ooh.
No. No, not us. Get that horrible book away.
Am I rude, impolite, or inconsiderate? Do I ridicule others?
He's accusing me.
Yeah, sorry. Here's a great one. Do I habitually look for flaws and point them out to others?
No, it's good constructive criticism.
Do I complain?
Never. Do I lie?
Oh, man. Let's see. Is that it? Have I discussed or listened to discussions of others' faults?
Ooh.
Have I criticized anyone uncharitably?
No.
Have I minimized or explained away my failures?
Never. No.
Here's an interesting one.
How can you minimize or explain away what doesn't exist? I haven't minimized or explained away the unicorn in the garden either.
Wow. And for the last one, am I touchy and hypersensitive?
Oh, no, not me. No, I'm not. How do you say these things? You see, obviously he was writing. This is character assassination. He mounted a personal attack on me. And now you're peddling this.
See,
everyone's going to read that and say, oh, it's for Charles.
That's how everyone should feel. Everyone should feel basically assaulted right now if they're honest with themselves.
No. You're assaulting me personally. Everyone's going to pick that book up, even if they've never heard of me, and said, oh, that's Charles Coulombe he's talking about. See, I know what your game is. See, it's not bad enough. You reduce me to servitude. Now you humiliate me publicly.
Well, see, you're using
by accusing me of all these sins which I couldn't possibly have anything to do with.
It's called mortification. It's participating in the sorrowful mysteries.
Oh boy, you are holy.
I've said this before in Lent. That's the whole purpose behind the fish, and it's a penitential spirit that we have our meals in.
What is it? No holiness without humility. No humility without humiliation.
There you go.
But that's good. Well, it is autumn. I suppose I should say something about the upcoming feasts.
Yes.
Well, as you know, we have. Let me just look at my cheat sheet. Actually, I'm not cheating. We're getting ready today. It's in the traditional calendar, the 17th. This is the feast of St. Margaret Mary Alacoque.
Ooh.
What's that?
That's a big one.
Yeah, it's a very big one. And this is still the month of the Holy Rosary. But, and there's a big but coming up. In the not too distant future, heavens, October 22nd. Golly, I can't remember whose day it is. Yes, I can. St. John Paul II. So get ready.
Oh, man.
But wait, there's more. Don't forget that in the traditional calendar, the last Sunday of this month is Christ the King. So get ready for the Feast of Christ the King. And wait, there's more. I believe it's October 24th. I'd have to check it to make sure, but I think October 24th is... You ready?
Ready.
In fact, it's a Thursday this year, so I may well be demonstrating some mark of it. You ready?
Ready.
It's United Nations Day.
Oh. Wow, that's so exciting.
So we have to commemorate the foundation of the UN. I will wear my UN lapel pin on the 24th to help everybody get in the mood.
We appreciate that, Charles.
And there's more. There's more. Now, the UN actually has a hymn, a national hymn, so to speak. Words by W.H. Auden. But the song that I've always thought should be the UN anthem is from 1962. It's one of those early rock and roll songs I was talking about. Telstar.
Yeah.
You know, commemorating the very first communications satellite, and in a sense, an ode to the glorious future of mankind in space. And wait, there's more. When that song came out around that time, it was flushing around my little mind. In 1964, we had the World's Fair in New York City. One of my earlier memories, the World's Fair. It was not so long after the death of President Kennedy, so we were ready to partay. The symbol of the World's Fair was the perisphere, which was the globe of the Earth. Now, keeping in mind Telstar, NASA's symbol, you've seen that, the round thingy with the stars. In my little brain, as it was then, I sort of conflated the UN symbol, the NASA symbol, and the World's Fair perisphere. The idea that all of it was somehow coming together, you know, a bright new future, early 60s. I mean, Fireball XL5, the glorious tomorrow. And all of us would face this, the developed nations and the developing nations together under the blue and white flag and all that stuff. It was going to be great.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. And Paul VI spoke at the UN.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was still living in New York. And there's more to it. There's more to it. To this very day, if you go to the Church of the Holy Family, which is the parish church for the UN, do you know what you'll see in the sanctuary?
What?
The Vatican flag and
the UN flag?
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Just so. The better world tomorrow that so many thoughtful people place their hopes in. It's coming. It's great. It's 1964. What? Why are you looking so... He's lost his marbles, right? I know that look.
Just sort of...
You give me that look whenever I put any money into the company raffle. You always, and I always tell you, I could win.
Yeah.
And you roll your eyes, just the way you did just now. I could win. I could win the company raffle.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you give me the same look. See? But you give me the same bloody look that you just gave me now when I said here in 64, we've got this bright new future.
So?
Well, am I supposed to believe that you have a lack of trust in the raffle system of the company? Or am I supposed to believe you don't think that there's a glorious future awaiting us here in 1964?
Charles, I've said it before and I'll say it again. There's nothing wrong with hope, okay? Hope for the future.
Hope. Oh, hope. Hope.
I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say what we've said so often about hope, but let's keep it PG.
What she's been put through. What she's been put through. It's so sad. Do you think she'll find happiness?
Okay.
Will she ever settle down?
Okay. Yeah. So hope. Hope
Poor
springs
Hope.
Eternal.
Indeed, she does.
Okay. Okay. Any final words, Charles?
Yes, indeed. Indeed. I have final words. And my final words are, ladies and gentlemen, other than the usual final words, which we'll do in just a moment, I simply once again will voice the phrase of Richard O'Brien in Rocky Horror Picture Show. Stay sane inside insanity. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody be going nuts. Don't you do it. This is autumn, for heaven's sake. You know what's coming? You know what's staring us in the face after the Feast of Christ the King? Hallowtide. All Halloween. All Hallows Eve. All Saints' Day. All Souls' Day. St. Hubert's Day. The Feast of Hunters. And then we're in November, my birth month. I was born November 8th, just for those of you who want to send money or gifts. And it is the month of the Holy Souls. And on the 11th, we're going to have Martinmas, the Feast of St. Martin. We're going to have, on that same day, Veterans/Remembrance/Armistice Day, so you can remember the gallant dead of 100 years ago and more recent conflicts, wherever you want to, but do remember them. Thanksgiving Day in the United States. Oh, by the way, all my Canadian friends keep bagging on me that I never mentioned Canadian Thanksgiving.
When is that?
Last Monday. So it's come and gone. But a belated happy Thanksgiving to all of our friends up in the Dominion of Canada. We love you. The Maple Leaf forever. Yes. Yes. God save the Queen and Right of Canada. Yeah. Yeah. At Queenston and at Lundy's Lane, our fathers bravely well, all that stuff. Yes, 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 yes. That's right. Oh, Canada, my home and native land. You bet. That we stand on guard for thee. True North. So, all my Canadian friends, I hope we got that out of my system, if not yours. All right. So, what I was saying is that American Thanksgiving is coming up at the end of the month, and then Advent kicks in. But December the 8th, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and that's really when Americans should be pulling out the stars and stripes and cheering and jumping up and down, because Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception is our patroness. Oh, and by the way, every one of the 50 states has a patron too. Look it up on Wikipedia. Lastly but not least, as far as that goes, after the 8th, we'll really be in the midst of Advent. We'll have Our Lady of Guadalupe coming up, and then, Christmas, 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 Christmas. Then autumn will turn to winter. Even in LA, the weather will become decent for a while. So, why do I say all this? Because no matter how crazy things may be in church and state and culture and society, reality remains. And it's up to you, ladies and gentlemen, not to succumb to insanity, but to remain tuned in to reality. And why, you ask? Because if it's Monday,
it's off the menu.
And the soul you save
may be your own.
Take care until next week. God bless you all.